First, you set up your Docker desktop. You can download Docker desktop at docker.com/products/Docker desktop. Installation is pretty well documented, so we'll skip that part here. So in order to start the Secondo database, the first thing you have to do is to pull the container image from the container registry. In this example, we are using Docker Hub, which is the default Docker registry when using Docker. So the command to pull a Docker image is docker pull. And if you want to find out where the Docker image is located, it's on hub.docker.com. And by looking after Secondo, you can find Secondo DB Secondo here. So this is the location. There's also the command. You can also cut and paste that, which will be this one. And this will pull the image tagged with the version latest. So the version latest is basically the last version that has been committed to GitHub, where the source code of this image is located. So you can go to github.com. And there's the Docker file for the container image. And whenever this container file is updated, the creation of new image will be triggered. All right, but we are not doing this here. We're just using the Secondo image that's tagged with latest. You can also look at dockerhub.com, and you will see that latest is a different version than 0.4.0. So it is a different build, but nothing really changed. So in this case, we can use those versions equally. And generally, it is recommended to use a version and not latest, so that whenever you perform a deployment, you'll get that particular version and not some version that you cannot predict what's in there, because this version can change at any point in time. If you want to have the most recent build, then this one would be the one to use. However, it's not an official release, so a version tag would be to be preferred. All right, so this takes a bit. So now where the container image is downloaded, it is ready to be started. So the README file tells me how to start and also how to build containers and container images. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to start a container image. So this basically tells Docker to run an interactive shell, a container, and also mount a local disk and expose the container port 1234 to the local port 1234, and use the container image Secondo in that particular version. So we take that command and modify it a bit. So the name is all right. This is the name of the local this is going to be the name of the local container. Now, per default, and in contrast to virtual machines, a Docker container is stateless. So if we do not mount a volume into the container, the contents of the database will be lost when the container is restarted, which is surely not what we want. So then this command basically mounts a directory of the host system into the container to achieve persistency of the data directory. So this directory is where the databases will be located of Secondo, and it's going to be a persistent disk mounted into the container. This thing means that the local port of the pod, or in this case the container 1234, is mounted to the local port 1234 of my host machine. So we are using the Secondo DB Secondo image, and we have pulled the version latest. So as I have started already a Docker container, there is a conflict. So although you can see there is no running container, the container is still there and still occupies that name. So by deleting the stopped container, we are now good to start a new one. So as you can see, that's pretty fast. So container startup times are very fast compared to virtual machines, as this is basically nothing more than a shielded process rather than a fully featured virtual machine running on a hypervisor. To be fair, Docker Desktop obviously creates something like a virtual machine to create containers inside of it, to separate containers from the host system. But in a real-world setup, you could basically deploy Docker to any physical machine. However, we are not targeting to use Docker, so the creation of a container image does not serve the purpose of using Docker in production, but Kubernetes instead, which uses the same container format, image format to be precise. So here we are at the Secondo monitor, which means we are now good to start the database. Starting the Java interface, the Java UI, and you can already see that there has been a connection to the database. There is no such database, so we have to restore the database before we proceed. So we'll do that by picking up the manual, and there's the command on how to restore a dataset. In this case, I want to have a shell into the container. Now, I have a shell in the container, but it's basically blocked by the Secondo monitor. So having another shell to the container is not a problem. So in order to connect to a container, all I have to do is start a bash inside the container. So we should see there's a Secondo running, which means it is actually the same container. So I'm connecting to the Secondo database via a socket connection. And restore the database. So now it should be possible to run a simple query. And here we go. And it should also be possible to run the same query in the Java GUI. So here we go.